Hi, I'm Jane, and together with Jodes, we are two proud feminists passionate about female empowerment. This podcast is our take on the real conversations, real issues, and real challenges we must stay focused on if we're going to inspire the next generation of female leaders, managers, and entrepreneurs to pick up the baton and continue the journey to equality. But be warned, there will be rants and the odd profanity, but mainly just lots of curious conversations, uplifting stories, great guests, and food for thought on the path we still have to travel. It is clear that our young girls need us to harness our gumption and to use our voices now to make the changes we all know need to happen. It's time to be a pioneer, not a passenger. To paraphrase the famous words of a female game changer, Hollywood's iconic Bette Davis, fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy ride.
Hello, welcome back to series 3 and our final episode in this series. So episode 6, and we've been saving the best episode in this series till the last because, as you know, throughout this series, we've been promising you two very special guests in this episode. So we're really, really excited today, aren't we, Jane?
We are, yeah.
To welcome two good men. And we've decided to bring both of our husbands onto the podcast for this episode. So hello to Jane's husband, Tony. Hi, Tony.
Hi, how are we doing?
There we go. That's Tony, Jane's husband. And I've got my husband here, David. Hello, David.
Hello.
So he's giving himself a round of applause.
Yeah.
A fabulous entry. So
Two very brave men.
Yeah, definitely. And so, as you know, if you've been listening throughout this particular series, the theme for this series has been all around women and work. Does it? So does the whole idea of women having a career, having a job, an ambition, climbing a career ladder, does it really work for us? So we've been discussing lots of those challenges throughout this series, and many of our solutions throughout this series have centered around the need for us to speak up a little bit more and have that sisterhood that we talk about so often. And we talked a bit about upstanding and speaking up for other people when we see things happen for them. And one of the things that we've talked a lot about is how men can support us in this particular kind of scenario. So we thought it'd be a perfect opportunity to get some men on and get their views on whether women and work does actually work, what it looks like through their lens, because up until now, you've only ever had stuff through a woman's lens. So we thought it'd be good to bring these guys on and talk to them a little bit about that stuff. So yeah, we've got some very specific questions that we want to talk about. And naturally, as we have done with our other two guests in this particular series, it makes sense to start at the top of the shop, doesn't it, on that killer question, women and work, does it? What are the views of the guys in our room? So, Tony, let's come over to you first. So do you want to do a little bit of an intro, just to, a 30-second, this is Tony, that leads into your view on that question?
Well, I'm Tony. I'm a man of my generation, I would say, because at my age, I had certain entrenched views, which on meeting Jane certainly got diluted and also got amended. So I think being a man of my generation, I've had a lot to learn. So yeah, I think that's probably me. I'm on a learning curve, but I'm probably on the downward part of the learning curve now about feminism. So I'm not. To add to that, I'm a retired police officer. I was a police officer for 30 years. And if any of you ever watched Life on Mars, that was my police station because I joined in 1970. So I was through that part of life on Mars as a policeman. So that's the entrenched values that we had. So it's been a lot of learning for me.
Okay, so that's quite an interesting position to have been in a very interesting time, I guess.
It was, but and it was at the time when things were changing dramatically for for men and women.
So what was it? What was it like in that perspective then for women in work? Did it work for women to have aspirations and stuff? In your lived experience, what was that like?
I don't think it did too much early on. Sort of the 70s. It was very difficult, I think. It was very male dominated, very, very macho. But it altered. And when I left in just before 2000, it had changed dramatically, and rightly so. I mean, when I look back at how it was in the 70s and 80s to how it changed correctly. You know, it was very macho in the early parts of my career.
Okay. I always say to Tony, if I'd have met him in that era, he would not have been on my radar in any way, shape, or form. We would have been miles apart. But you know, we've aligned. We've aligned. Definitely aligned.
A meeting of minds for sure.
I think so. Yeah.
Right. Well, that's a really interesting perspective, because I guess then, if we come to you, David, and actually you've probably lived in a bit of a different era and had a very different kind of job and career, I guess it looks a bit different for you. If I ask the same question for you, women and work, does it? What do you say?
Yeah. Hello. So absolutely it works. Let me give you a quick intro and background then. So I think, Tony, I'm probably a generation gap younger than you.
Yeah.
Probably just one step lower, though. Not too far away.
I get away with the 2 steps, don't I?
Yeah, you do.
Yeah. All right. You can't say that again now.
Sorry.
Okay.
I think there's probably a couple of things at play here. So, first of all, I think I grew up in the 80s, and I grew up like a great many of my generation as young boys being brought up by single mums. So I think, you know, we look at the divorce rates from the 1970s to the 1980s, they tripled. And so I think that's firstly, I had no male role model around me while I was really young. And the second thing is the line of work I'm in. So, you know, corporate finance. So it's a very corporate world. And actually, ever since I've started working, I've been surrounded by women, women bosses, women senior leaders. I've managed women in my team. So for me, it's not really a thing. So this whole conversation, it's great that I'm being invited in to give my opinion, but actually I'm kind of the choir already. So I have a view, but it doesn't take me a lot to get to where we kind of want to go with this feminist agenda. So I think for me, does it work? Yes. It does work. It could be better. Of course it could. But actually, from what I see in many cases, whilst it's not perfect, it does work.
So you see lots of examples of women having brilliant careers, and being able to do the things that they want to do.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and also not just seeing it, but it be normal. So there's been no call outs that someone is a woman who is in a senior position or in a real decision-making position. Actually, it's not a thing. When you start looking at the detail in terms of roles and numbers and what does the data tell you in terms of gender pay gap, that might tell a different story, but that is a bit of a journey. But so from my perspective, it kind of does work.
And that's I guess that's the kind of interesting thing, isn't it, about different lived experiences and what we see based on what we've had around us at different periods in our lives.
I've always had a problem with the word feminism. Again, I go back to the fact that of my age that it had always had negative connotations for me. You know, you think of the dungaree wearing Greenham Common sort of people that of the 80s or late 70s, 80s, and feminism was the big thing. But I think I've always been a feminist. I was brought up by, you know, a very strong mother. I had an older sister. You know, I was always, it was drummed into me of the polite, always walk on the outside of a woman walking down the street. You know, you walk on the outside, the roadside of the curb and stuff like that. It's ingrained in you to respect women. that you, but it's not feminism as I saw it in those days, you know. But the word just had a very, very bad connotation for me. But now, yes, I am a feminist by today's terms. I don't see differences between men and women. Yes, we're different, but we are the same. You know, I mean, we have different strengths, we have different stuff within us. But yes, and to boil it right down, yes, I am a feminist now.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's interesting that, isn't it? That actually what we now perceive to be a feminist is a lot sort of softer and a bit gentler. It's not the rah-rah that it was maybe once.
It's changed.
Yeah. And I think that's because we've fought a lot of the battles, haven't we? So the women that have come before us, those dungaree wearing, bra burning, whatever, suffragettes or campaigners or marchers, a lot of the big stuff we've done, haven't we? You know, we've got birth control, we've got the vote, we can own property, we can manage our own money, we can work, we can have a job, we can have a career, you know, all of these things, you know, we've worked hard for. And so the kind of nature of what feminism is has shifted, but actually it's still here and it's still needed.
Yeah. And even going back to the time of the suffragettes, you had the suffragists, a lot of men were suffragists as opposed to suffragettes. Suffragettes were slightly more militant. The suffragists, which a lot of men were supporters of men, but without the I was going to say violence, without chaining themselves to the railings. So they were very supportive of the women's movement. So they were suffragists as opposed to suffragettes. So it goes right back to then. And so,
that's a brilliant example, actually, isn't it? Yeah. Cool. All right then. That's really interesting. So we've got a couple of different views there on does women and work in that sense, but there are still challenges, whether it, you know, we've had lived experience that it works or that it hasn't, but it has moved forward. And we've obviously shared some experiences, and we've had guests that have shared some experiences. What's really interesting is to try and understand a man's view of what do you see as the challenges that exist, you know, for women in work still, you know, are they visible to non-women people, I guess is the question. So I don't know what your view on that is, Tony.
The main challenges for men, really, I think we've lost our place. Whether we've lost it or we've given it up or whether it's just disappeared, I don't know. I mean, there used to be. I always think of the disappearance of the alpha male. I'm not talking about the chest banging, you know, alpha male, the misogynist, whatever. What I'm talking about is a man, the provider, the breadwinner, the protector, kind of has been removed or is sliding into the background, and now we don't kind of know our place. Whereas, you know, women have taken a lot of that away from us. And as males, we kind of want it back. We want to be the protector. Yes, perhaps we can't be the breadwinner because, you know, finances and the economic thing won't allow us to be the sole breadwinner of that. So we have to accept that. But also we want to be a protector. We want to be able to protect our family. We want to look after what we have and look after society as well. And that's been eroded a little bit. So we're left a little bit in the dark. Where do we go? And if we do speak out and say, well, hang on a minute, you know, we're branded then as anti-female or we're branded as this, that, the other. If we do speak up for ourselves and say, well, yeah, I want to do this. I want to protect. I want to do this. I want to do that. So we're kind of losing our place, and we have to adapt to the new norms. But it's taking time.
Okay.
It's taking time for us to adapt to these new norms and find our place in society, whereby as a male. You know.
Can I just ask you? That's fascinating, because you talked about. I get that scenario in the home. I get that you know, that breadwinner role is not as powerful as it used to be, because in the economy we live in, we both have to go out to work to have a house and all the rest of it. You talked about that men have lost their place in society as a whole, and yet it's still men that control that. It's still men that are in power.
Certain men. I mean, where it's going, I mean, we don't really have much of a say in where it's going. I mean, if you're looking at what rules the world, yeah, men rule the world, but it is a strata of men that rule the world, and it's how we change that at the top. You know, it's very frustrating for us to look at. I mean, just strange things that wind us up, and it comes from the top. And it's how do we change that attitude way beyond us in the scheme of things? It's how we change that.
So you're as uncomfortable and, you know, upset about that group of men, that powerful group of men that are ruling the world as we are.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Would you say the same?
Yeah, look, I think it's probably a bit deeper for me, but there's also some bits in there, Tony, that I kind of see it differently than you do. And I think those bits are, you know, where you talk about men trying to find their place and you know, struggling with that given what's happening in terms of feminism. I think for me, fundamentally, there's a little bit of a difference in that, you know, the move of feminism was always because women weren't allowed to. Nothing has stopped men in today's society from doing anything that they want to. And so I think actually we've still got a little bit of a way to go in terms of helping and supporting a fair and equal agenda for women. And I don't think anything's been taken off us at all. I think if we suddenly had things taken off us, then that would be a different story. But the point of this is it's about equality of opportunity for everybody. And so from that perspective, I kind of think that there's nothing stopping us and we have a very good place. But you're right, this hierarchy that we have at the moment in the world where we have an elite layer mainly dominated by men is just no good. I think it's also more about the elitism than the feminism as well.
I saw a fabulous example of it just was it yesterday or the day before, and it's something that I would never have picked up, but because of the awareness that I feel today, I picked it up straight away, and it's angered me. And I don't know, you know, it's an innocuous thing, but if you watch the England male team get off the bus,
football we're talking about, the male footballers getting off the bus and going onto an aeroplane to come home. They get off the bus, thank you very much, off they go, get on the plane and fly home. The women's team, who were in the World Cup final, got off the bus, were handed their own bags to take onto the plane. Now, that just has wound me up so much, because why couldn't somebody else have taken their bag? This is a world-class team that were in the World Cup final, and yet they were handed their bags. The men get off the bus, they just walk on their bags follow them, and that's what we're fighting against. You know, when you think about it, yeah, perhaps 20 years ago that wouldn't have even affected me, but it does today. And I think that's where we're looking at that bias towards women. You know, that should never have happened. They're a world-class football team. Get them on, you know, let them get somebody else to take their bags on board, and it's just wound me up. So that's what we're fighting against, you know, and changing that attitude towards women. You know, that was just me, and it's wound me up for days. That one of many
things.
One of many. Okay.
Well, do you know what? That's really interesting. And actually, Tony, in what you had to say, you kind of opened my eyes to realise that you see challenges for men in this as much as we're, you know, actually, you know, I'm just banging the drum of all the challenges that still exist for women. And it's interesting to hear from somebody else that actually, you know, it changes things for you.
Absolutely.
And but equally, you know, then seeing the flip side of the coin from David's perspective is interesting. But I guess the thing is, the world's going to move forward.
Hopefully.
I think coming back to that point around, there's so much unconscious bias that actually most people aren't even aware of. But to make this progress, we've got to start doing something with this. We've got to start speaking up about some of this stuff. Hence why we wanted to ask the two of you as because yes, absolutely, Jane and I see you both as feminists, as highly supportive of the women's agenda, highly supportive of your wives in everything that we want to do. For us in our households, things feel equitable in what we do. Is, actually, what is it then that other men who might be listening to this, or their wives are listening to this, and then they have a conversation about it, what is it that men need to be doing or could help by doing to start to move some of this forward? Like if we took that England team example, if there were guys around there at that point, what should they have done? So I guess that's a question. It's like, how can men contribute to carrying on this balance piece? And
it stems, again, we go back to the people at the top. If somebody arranged that trip and, they arranged the England men, they arranged the England women or trip, it stems again from somewhere probably beyond me that says that's wrong. And I probably would have said that's wrong as we were getting off the bus, but that wouldn't change. It's got to be, that unconscious bias is beyond us, and that's where we've got to be shouting at, is the people above us, the bosses or the organisers or whoever, and say, hey, that's wrong. It's wrong. There's an unconscious bias here towards women, and it needs to be called out up there. And yes, I would have called it out because it so angered me, but it wouldn't have helped at that time. It's the bias came 6 months before when they organised the trip.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because female football, I suppose, is another example of where women are playing serious catch up. In that there's a lot of work to do there in all areas of that game. And that is like that little example that wound you up, but there's a lot bigger stuff in that as well about, the inequality of the money, the inequality of the opportunity, of the resources, and so on. And so you look at female football, and to be honest, women were playing football before men. But you look at that inequality, and that's an example of where women we've got a long way to go. It's a very male dominated sport. It has been for decades, and here we are playing world class, but we're not treated in anywhere near the same way as the world class male footballers are. So that's a really good example, and there'll be hundreds of those examples across society. But that's a really good shout.
I think it is a good example. I think it stems a little deeper. So things are changing now, but if you look at women's football, actually you look back at grassroots level at girls, and only now is that becoming a bit of normal that young girls can play football in school and want to. So there is still a massive lag in that, and that we see now, despite the success of the England team. Actually, there is still a big challenge to go. We probably won't see the fruits of this for another 10, 15 years. If you flip that on the head and say, right, where would that be the same for a man? And if we took a typical stereotypical role, let's say something like midwifery. Actually, if a man wanted to be a midwife, there wouldn't be any challenge in a man being able to be a midwife. There wouldn't be any structural constraints for that to take place.
He'd get paid the going rate, he'd get the uniform, he'd get the same benefits.
All of it. And actually, they've got the same opportunity of education, of university than anyone. And so when we look at that and you kind of think, so there's nothing really stopping men, but there is still all of those structural constraints that are only just being addressed now that might constrain a woman. So I think for me, there's probably a couple of things that
what men
can do. So for me, the most important number one is be self-aware. So before we ask anyone else to do anything, it's that number one, self-awareness. And even this happened to me just at the moment. I'm going through some interviews, and I was in an interview for a new role. And even in an interview, being interviewed by a mix, so men and women, I held the door open, and there was a small delay on something, and I said something along the lines of, "Oh, hang on, just 2 seconds, be right back, guys." And actually, it was that unconscious, but I then sort of brought that up and said, "Oh, sorry for saying guys, I'm really sorry about that." But actually, the response back was, "Oh, it's fine, don't worry about it." And actually, the response back should have been, "Oh, no, that's okay, thank you." So I think, there is absolutely self-awareness, but equally where it does happen, everyone needs to kind of call it out and just not make excuses for it. So I think for me, self-awareness, and then, educating ourselves on what the things to do are, is probably the biggest ones as well. And then, Tony, just to support your point, where we see it not being role modeled in society and on telly and in the media, that absolutely is a challenge too.
Yeah, and it's about looking outside of your own lived experience. I mean, I am made up that David got to feel like, he was surrounded by great women as he grew up, and has had the fortunate career that he's had of working with brilliant people, men and women around him. But part of that awareness is knowing that it's not like that everywhere, and in a lot of places, it's still probably down the end of the spectrum that Tony experienced in the 70s. That's a big spectrum of everything in between, and it's about everyone realizing that. David sits right up at the positive end, had a great experience, things have worked for women, it's looked good, down to the other end where it's quite frankly a bag of rubbish, and so part of that awareness is realizing that your reality isn't necessarily the same for everybody else's, and that can go in all kinds of directions on that spectrum, I think. And you're right, you know what, it's not just a women's issue. It was funny, wasn't it, Jane? We went to see a show at the Lowry a few weeks ago, didn't we, of Caitlin Moran's new book, What About Men?
Yeah.
And a question came from the audience. It's kind of said to her, "Why have you written a book about men?" And she was kind of like, "Well, nobody else was." And she's kind of asked the guy who asked the question, "Why haven't you done it? You're a guy. If I ask the question of you, why haven't you done anything about it?" And he kind of said, "Well, because if I speak up about it, I'll be vilified on social media." And she kind of responded and said, "Well, I have been, but I still did it." And it's that, it's that thing about speaking out, and that actually, our younger boys now are teenagers and boys in their early 20s. The one thing that did really open our eyes to is they don't understand why they are kind of getting a dog's life, why they see men are getting blamed for everything, yet they weren't part of the 70s and 80s male culture that many of us were around when it was created. And what Caitlin was saying was that these boys haven't really got any strong, positive male role models, in the limelight, that are speaking up and showing them the way to be. They've just got people like Andrew Tate, and actually, therefore, they need to see other role model men stand up for some of these things and start to speak out positively about the right stuff, about what it means to have a respectful relationship, what it means to be properly intimate, not what they see in modern day porn, all of that kind of stuff. I think I'll go soapbox about that though now. But interestingly, obviously a lot of men, that man in the audience, Jane, he was saying that he didn't feel comfortable to speak out because he felt like he would be vilified. And actually, we've come across some research, haven't we, about why men.
So, obviously in making this series, we talked to a few men that were running allyship programs in big companies. And one of them provided us with some research that had been done by a big US company. And he talked about there are 5 reasons why good men stay silent, why good men don't say anything in these situations in corporate or on the tube or whatever. And we thought it would be a really good closer to ask both you two good men a yes and no answer to these questions. So before we ask you the final question, which is what's it like living with us,
All right.
maybe we should leave the room at that point. So these are the 5 questions. These are the 5 reasons that came up again and again and again why men do not speak up and become allies. So it's a yes or no from both of you. So number 1, they don't want to say the wrong things. They're frightened of saying the wrong things.
Yeah.
Yes, it's a yes from Tony.
No from me.
No from the
You're happy. You're not frightened about saying the wrong thing. No. Okay.
Number 2, they are concerned if they do, other men will judge them. No from Tony.
Yes from me.
And a yes from David.
Okay, so Tony's not bothered about being judged, but
Absolutely not.
That's on your mind.
Okay, so the 3rd one was it takes a lot of time and effort to do this calling out and so on and so forth. It takes too much time and effort.
No.
Yes or no? No from Tony.
No.
And a no from David.
That one's clearly invalid.
Yeah, that's clear.
We're not having that as an excuse.
Nope. The 4th one was if I call somebody else out, it means I'm going to have to challenge my own behaviours. Yes or no from Tony?
No.
No. David?
No.
You're more than happy to have your own behaviour.
Okay, fantastic. And the 5th one was this word, which I did have to actually look up, called whataboutery. And whataboutery is a technique where you respond to a question or an accusation by making a counter accusation or raising a different issue. So you try and get the attention off what it is you've just been asked. Oh, yeah, that's all right. But what about this? Or, well, yeah, but I do this, and so on and so forth. So is whataboutery something that you would state as a problem or a challenge as to why you would stay silent or not?
No.
So no from Tony.
Absolutely not.
And it's a no from David. You see, we told you they were good men. We told you they were good men.
Jane, just do me a favour. Read for me 3 and 4 again.
Okay, so the 3rd was we're having a recount here, are we? The 3rd is that it takes too much time and effort to call it out.
Too much time and effort. And
the 4th was if I call somebody else out, it means I've got to challenge my own behaviour.
So these were two reasons why men don't call out. Yeah. Like,
they stay silent, they don't call out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, do you know what? The fact that, not about what I think about it, but just the fact that those 2 are in the top 5 speaks volumes, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It does indeed. It does indeed. So shall we ask the final question, Jodes?
Yeah, go on then.
So the final question is, what's it like, and keep it clean, what's it like living with a campaigner, a kind of female campaigner, and somebody that would be considered a disruptor?
I think I'll follow David on this one. Go on, David. I'm going to stay to the last so I can get out the door.
Yeah. Do you know what, though? For me, there's two elements that spring to mind here. Number 1 is that I'm a father to 3 girls. So actually, it's really important to me that they grow up with a real sense of independence and ability. Also, number 2, I don't think I would be attracted to anyone that wasn't a feminist anyway, because, I guess on a personal level, I'm attracted to someone that is independent and smart and witty and all of those things. So actually, what's it like living? Well, I couldn't imagine not living with anybody that wasn't a feminist. And having 3 daughters means it's even more important to me.
Fantastic. Thank you, David. Yeah. Follow that, though.
I can't follow that. I'm going to leave. I've jotted down here, interesting, fun, never a day the same. However, sometimes the soapbox is a tad loud. And I do disagree occasionally. And I think that's probably it. A lot of the time I don't agree with some of the things that Jane would say with regard to feminism and that sort of stuff. But there are certain battles I will fight, and certain battles that I think, well, I'll let that one go. And I think that's part of living with a feminist, is that you pick your battles, and some of the stuff I'll just let slide. We met each other at the right time. I think, as Jane said initially, that she probably wouldn't have liked me, 30 years ago when I was a police officer. My views have changed, and fundamentally, what she's done is she's proved that I am a feminist, and I've always have been a feminist, but I just didn't know it.
I'm a feminist, and I didn't know it.
I didn't know it.
We'll have to get her a t-shirt.
Get that t-shirt. I'm a feminist, and I didn't know it. But you know what? You bring things to the table that I don't even see.
Yeah.
So I didn't see the thing of the football. I didn't get that at all. So you actually bring things to the table that I don't see, which can be quite dangerous.
No, I know. I'm not going to do it too often.
Because you just like fueling the fire, really.
You know what Tony's just said there, like, perfectly sums up the whole thing around, this isn't about men are better than women or women are better than men. I think David's made this point a couple of times as well, is that actually, we are different. And that's okay. We need to be able to have equity, but we don't have to be the same. We bring different qualities and traits and characteristics to the table, and they're all useful, and we need them all. Yeah, we do. And actually, that's what's lovely about, again, what Tony said about your relationship. It'd be boring if we all agreed with each other all the time as well, wouldn't it? We need that disagreement and debate and different perspectives. That's what makes it interesting and good.
I mean, Tony's he's always my go-to sage. He's always the first person that I will bounce something off, because I always know he'll tell me exactly how it is.
Yeah.
If I'm too high up on that soapbox, or I'm becoming, unrelatable because I'm just literally on one, he's like, whoa, and he kind of takes me to a different place, and I do the same for him. So yeah, it's good. And it's always interesting when you marry somebody that's not from the same decade as you, isn't it?
Yeah.
Be careful now. I'm not that many decades behind you. All right, that's okay then.
Yeah.
It's always interesting.
Well, what a way to round off series 3. Actually, it's been really lovely to just bring a completely different lens, completely different perspective, and a new conversation into the podcast. It has been lovely. We've got some exciting stuff planned for season 4, haven't we? We're all American then, not season 4, series.
You've been watching too much Netflix. Yeah, so series 4, we are going to pick up on something that's been quite a theme for us for every single podcast we've done, and it's about this male-female energy. And it's like we all have male energy and we all have female energy, and it's where we choose to live. And I think when we've talked about a lot of work being male coded, it's very tough for women to progress in that environment within and hold on to their female energy. They tend to shift more into their male for obvious reasons, and that's costing them. That's definitely costing them in their personal and professional life. And it could also be the reverse. It's also costing men if they have to go too far into that other side as well. When it's not natural. If it's natural, if that's naturally where you live, it's not an issue. But if it's not naturally where you live and it's sabotaging your authenticity, then it's definitely an issue. Mm-hmm. So we're going to do a full series on this subject, how it affects us at work, in our home life, in the way we bring up our children, in our relationships, in how we manage a team, so on and so forth. We're going to do a whole series on it. And so that should be very, very exciting, and something that a lot of women have been asking us about. Can we do more about that? So when we talk to women who've been listening to the podcast, we might have dropped this into an episode and it's like, can we do more about that? So we're going to do a whole series on it.
Well, I actually think it's big news for some people. They've never even heard of it. So, it's a great eye-opener to see a whole different way of understanding and viewing what's actually going on around you. Yeah. Fantastic. Right. Well, until then.
Thank you, boys.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
That's us signing off from series 3, and we will see you soon in series 4.
Bye.
You have been listening to Jane and Jodes on One. Until next time, remember, sisterhood matters.
Together, we are bold, brave, fierce, and unstoppable.